Beverly set the case file down and looked at me over the top of her glasses. "You've been doing this work for 11 years, she said. "Did anyone ever pursue this for you?" I had 300,000 reasons to answer that question, and every single one of them was stolen. Let me tell you what this story is so you know exactly what you're listening to. I was orphaned at 10 years old. Both parents killed in a car accident on a Tuesday afternoon. They left behind a trust worth approximately $300,000, built one paycheck at a time by a man who drove a delivery truck and a woman who hemmed dresses for church ladies at her sewing machine. Every dollar of it was meant for me, my care, my education, my future. Instead, it went to my foster parents, Jerome and Gloria Banks, a deacon and his wife who stood up in church and volunteered to take me in, and who the congregation praised every Sunday for their generosity. Good God-fearing people. That's what everyone said. Here's what those good, God-fearing people did. They took the monthly trust disbursements, nearly $2,000 a month, and spent them on themselves. New furniture, vacations to Myrtle Beach and Hilton Head and Charleston, matching dish sets with tissue paper between the plates, a leather recliner with a cup holder built into the armrest, clothes with the tags still on them hanging in their closet. And me, I wore hand-me-downs from the church donation bin, dresses with stains that wouldn't come out, shoes half a size too big until my feet grew, and then too small until the soles wore through. When I asked for a $45 field trip, Gloria sighed like I was a burden and said, "Money is tight right now, baby." She said that with a $3,200 resort brochure tucked inside her Bible. By the time I turned 18, there was $847 left. 847 out of 300,000. I found out. I got proof. I stood up in the same church where they paraded their righteousness every Sunday, and I told the truth out loud while Gloria's hat was still on and Jerome's Bible was still open. And years later, after a legal fight that took everything I had, all three of them, Jerome, Gloria, and her sister who helped hide the money, went to prison. That's where this story ends. But you need to hear where it starts. Because to understand how $300,000 disappeared from a child's trust, you have to understand what it took to build it. You have to know the kind of people my parents were, what they sacrificed, what they saved, and what they thought they were leaving behind. My parents were not wealthy people, and that's exactly why every dollar they left me mattered. My father, Raymond Cross, drove a delivery truck for 22 years, left the house before 5 every morning, came home after 6 every night, and never once complained about it in front of me. My mother, Lena, worked the front desk at a dentist's office until I was born, then picked up alterations from home, hemming pants, and taking in waistlines for women at church who trusted her with their good dresses. On Friday nights, she would sit at the sewing machine with her reading glasses on the tip of her nose and a pincushion shaped like a tomato on the table beside her, and the sound of that machine running was the sound of my childhood. They lived in a small house off Collier Road with a kitchen that was always too warm and a living room where my mother draped quilts over every piece of furniture. None of the quilts matched. She didn't care. She made some of them herself, cut from old shirts and curtain fabric, and the rest she found at yard sales, folded in plastic bins between ceramic angels and somebody's dead husband's neckties. Our plates didn't match either. 5 different patterns, collected 1 or 2 at a time from the same yard sales. But every Saturday morning, my mother set those mismatched plates on the table, turned the radio to the gospel station, and made breakfast like we were the richest family in Georgia. On her dresser sat a jewelry box with a broken clasp. It never stayed shut. You had to press down on the lid and hold it for a second. And even then it would pop back open if you weren't careful. Inside were her wedding ring, a pair of pearl earrings her mother gave her, and a thin gold chain my father bought her on their 10th anniversary. That was all, nothing worth more than a few $100s. But my mother kept that box on her dresser like it held the crown jewels. And every morning she would open it, pick something out, and put it on before she left the room. I was 10 years old when a car ran a red light on Peachtree Industrial and killed both my parents on a Tuesday afternoon. My father was driving. My mother was in the passenger seat. They were coming back from the grocery store. The bags were still in the trunk when the police came to the house. I am not going to describe what that was like for a 10-year-old because there are no words that fit inside that kind of emptiness. One day the radio was playing and the kitchen smelled like cinnamon, and my mother was humming something I almost remember. And the next day the house was silent, and strangers in dark suits were making decisions about my life in rooms I was not allowed to enter. What I will tell you is this. When they packed up my things, I held on to that jewelry box like it was the last piece of my mother still breathing. I pressed the lid down and it popped right back open, same as always. I didn't let go of it for 3 days. My parents left behind more than I understood at the time. The house was sold. There was a life insurance policy my father had paid into for years, the kind of policy a careful man keeps current even when money is short. And there were savings, more than anyone expected from a man who drove a delivery truck. But that was my father. He didn't buy new cars or go on vacations or eat lunch at restaurants. He packed the same cooler every morning, ham sandwich and an apple, and he put the difference away. Every paycheck, every year for 2 decades, it added up. When everything was settled, the estate totaled approximately $300,000 placed in trust for me until I turned 18. Monthly disbursements of between $1,800 and $2,400 were approved for my care, clothing, education, and living expenses. $300,000. I was 10. I didn't know what a trust was. I didn't know what a trustee was. I just knew that adults were signing papers, and none of them were my parents. And somebody somewhere was supposed to make sure I would be all right. That somebody turned out to be Jerome and Gloria Banks. They stepped forward at the church. That's how it happened. Pastor Whitfield made the announcement that little Amara Cross needed a home, and before the silence had time to settle, Jerome Banks stood up in his deacon suit and said they would take me. Gloria pressed her hand to her chest like the Holy Spirit had moved her right there in the pew. The congregation murmured their approval. Of course, the Banks would take her in. Jerome had been a deacon for 15 years. Gloria ran the women's auxiliary and organized the Easter breakfast every spring. They knew Raymond and Lena from the congregation. They were good, God-fearing people who opened their home to a child in need. And they would also serve as trustees of the estate, managing those monthly disbursements on my behalf. No one questioned that arrangement. Why would they? Jerome was a deacon. Gloria quoted scripture from memory. These were people you trusted with a child and her future. I moved into their house on a Saturday afternoon with a garbage bag full of clothes and my mother's jewelry box tucked under my arm. The house was bigger than the one I grew up in. Brick front, 2-car garage, a lawn Jerome mowed every Saturday in lines so straight they looked measured. Gloria showed me to a guest bedroom at the end of the hall that smelled like mothballs and Febreze. "Come on in, sweetheart," she said, smoothing the bedspread with both hands. "We got your room all ready for you." I set the jewelry box on the nightstand. The clasp popped open. I pressed it shut. "Thank you, ma'am," I said. That was the beginning. On Sundays, the Banks were magnificent. Gloria wore hats with brims wide enough to shade the whole pew, and gloves that matched her dress, and shoes that clicked on the tile when she walked down the center aisle. Jerome's voice was deep enough to rattle the hymnal rack when he read scripture. They sat in the 3rd row, same spot every week, and after the service they stood in the fellowship hall, drinking coffee from styrofoam cups, while the congregation told them what good people they were. "The Lord put that child right where she needed to be," Sister Davis said one Sunday, squeezing Gloria's arm. Gloria smiled the way she always smiled when someone praised her, humble but pleased, like she had practiced it. "We just doing what the Lord called us to do," she said. "That child needed a home and we had room." I stood behind them in a dress from the church donation bin. a blue floral thing with a small stain on the collar that didn't come out no matter how many times I washed it, and shoes that were half a size too big. And I believed every word. I need you to hear that. I believed them. I was a 10-year-old orphan who had lost everything, and these people took me in, and I was grateful down to my bones. I was so grateful that I made myself small. I did my homework at the kitchen table without being asked. I washed my dishes and wiped the counter after. I kept my room so clean you could have walked in any hour and found nothing out of place, because I understood, without anyone saying it, that my place in this house was conditional. I did not ask for things, because asking for things meant being a burden, and being a burden meant risking the only home I had left. There was a trust fund with $300,000 in it, disbursements coming in every month, $1,800 to $2,400 earmarked for my care, and I was wearing another girl's stained dress to church. But children need things, even the ones who have learned not to ask. They grow out of shoes. They need notebooks and pencils and a backpack that doesn't have a broken zipper. They need a coat when winter comes and the old one doesn't close anymore. And every time I gathered the courage to ask, Gloria gave me the same answer. Money is tight right now, baby. She said it when I needed new shoes in September. She said it when my backpack strap broke and I asked for another one. She said it when I needed socks without holes and a winter coat that actually fit. Jerome would nod from his recliner, not looking up from the television. Your mother's doing her best, he'd say, which was his way of ending the conversation. So I learned. I patched my backpack with duct tape. I wore the shoes half a size too big until my feet caught up, and then kept wearing them until my toes pressed against the front and I could feel the pavement through the sole. I got my school supplies from the free bin in the guidance office and told myself it was no different from what anybody else did. I became the girl who never needed anything because I had trained myself not to need, because needing things cost money and money was tight, and I was already enough of a burden just by existing in someone else's house and eating someone else's food and sleeping in someone else's guest room that still smelled like mothballs 3 years later. I didn't know then what those estate checks were paying for. I wouldn't know for years. 8th grade, my class planned a trip to the Georgia Aquarium. The permission slip sat on the kitchen counter for 2 days before I brought it up. $45. I had rehearsed how I would ask. I waited until Gloria was in a good mood after Wednesday night Bible study when she always came home humming. Miss Gloria, my class has a field trip coming up. It's $45. She didn't even look at the slip. She sighed, the way she always sighed, like my asking was a weight she carried and I should have known better. Baby, we just can't afford it right now. I nodded. Yes, ma'am. The morning of the trip, I sat in the school library while my classmates boarded the bus outside. I pulled a book off the shelf and opened it on my lap and tried to disappear into the pages the way I always did when the world got too heavy. I could hear them through the window, laughing and pushing each other in line, calling out seats they wanted on the bus. I read the same page 3 times without taking in a single word. $45? I want you to remember that number. A few weeks later, I was straightening up the living room. Gloria had left her Bible on the side table, the big leather-bound one with the gold edges she carried to church every Sunday. I picked it up to dust underneath, and a brochure slid out from between the pages and landed face up on the carpet. Hilton Head Island, a beachfront resort. White sand, blue water, a photograph of a couple walking along the shore at sunset. At the bottom in gold lettering, 7 nights, ocean view suite, $3,200. I picked it up, looked at it. The pages were glossy and crisp, not wrinkled or old. Someone had tucked it in there recently. I slid it back between the pages of Gloria's Bible, set the Bible down, and went back to dusting. No, I didn't think about it. Not really. Maybe someone at church had given it to her. Maybe she was holding it for a friend. Maybe it was a dream, a someday thing people kept in their Bibles next to the prayer cards and funeral programs. I was 14. I had no reason to connect a resort brochure to a denied field trip. No reason to do that math, but you can do it. $3,200 tucked inside a Bible, $45 denied to a child sitting on a $300,000 trust. And from this moment forward, every time Gloria Banks said money is tight, I want you to remember what was pressed between the pages of her good book. High school changed things, though I could not have told you exactly how at the time. It was not one moment. It was accumulation. Packages started arriving at the house, not every day, but regularly enough that I noticed. Brown boxes on the porch when I came home from school, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time. A set of dishes, not the kind from yard sales, but the kind that came in matched sets with tissue paper between each plate and a brand name I recognized from the commercials on television. New curtains for the living room, heavy fabric with a pattern that looked expensive, a flat screen television that Jerome mounted on the wall one Saturday while I was at the library, an espresso machine that sat on the kitchen counter like a showpiece. Nobody explained the purchases. Nobody had to. It was their house, their money. At least that's what I thought. But it was my trust paying for it. I just didn't know that yet. The banks traveled. Myrtle Beach in the spring, Savannah in the fall. A long weekend in Florida that stretched into 5 days, Charleston for Gloria's birthday. I stayed behind, sometimes with Sister Davis from church, sometimes alone once I was old enough. They came back with sunburns and stories and a souvenir magnet for the refrigerator. They did not bring me, not once, not to any of them. I stood in the kitchen looking at that magnet, a little pelican from Myrtle Beach with a price sticker still on the back, and I did the quiet arithmetic that was becoming a habit. They could not afford $45 for my field trip, but they could afford to leave town 4, 5, 6 times over the years I lived with them. The math did not make sense. But I did not say so because I was 15 and then 16, and I had no power, no proof, and no one to tell. There was one more thing. Not all the packages came to the house. Sometimes I saw Gloria on the phone, her voice low, coordinating a delivery that never appeared in our living room. I asked once, carefully, the way you learn to ask when you're a child in someone else's home. "Oh, that's going to my sister's place," Gloria said, not looking up from her phone. I didn't know the sister's name then. I didn't know her address or what was being shipped, why it couldn't come to our house. But I noticed that Gloria's voice dropped half a register when she made those calls. The way people sound when they are arranging something they don't want overheard. I filed it away the way I had learned to file everything away, in the quiet place in my mind where the things that didn't add up lived alongside the things I was not allowed to question. By the time I was 17, the gap between what the banks said and what the banks had was wide enough to see from across the room. New tile in the bathroom, a ring on Gloria's finger I had never seen before, something with a stone that caught the light when she gestured during dinner. Jerome's new recliner, the leather kind that reclines all the way back with a cup holder built into the armrest. Their closet, which I saw once when Gloria sent me to fetch her church shoes, was full of clothes with tags still on them. And still, whenever I asked for anything, the same refrain, delivered with the same side like a hymn they had memorized. "Money is tight, baby." I was wearing shoes from the donation bin. They were taking vacations I was not invited on. Packages were arriving at the house and disappearing to addresses I did not know. And every month, somewhere in an account I had never seen, the trust my father spent 22 years building was getting smaller. I sat at that kitchen table doing my homework, and I watched. I did not know the word for what they were doing. I did not know the scope of it, or the mechanics, or the dollar amounts. I could not name it, but something had shifted behind my ribs. Something quiet and permanent, like a door closing in a room I would never enter again. I was no longer the grateful orphan who believed everything she was told. I was watching. I was counting. And I was waiting for something I could not yet name. Some moment when the distance between their words and their lives would become too wide for even me to ignore. That moment was coming, I just didn't know it yet. It came on a Saturday. Gloria's sister Carla drove up from Macon with a voice that carried through every room of the house. I had never met her. I had heard her name on the phone, always in that low register Gloria used when she was arranging things she did not want overheard, but I had never heard Carla speak until she walked into our living room and started going through my mother's things like she was sorting inventory at a yard sale. My mother's quilts, the ones she made from old shirts and curtain fabric folded on the guest bed, the mismatched plates, 5 different patterns from 5 different yard sales, still in a box in the hall closet, and my mother's jewelry box, the one with the broken clasp that never stayed shut, the one I had held for 3 days after my parents died because it was the last thing that still smelled like her, everything that was left of Lena Cross in that house. Carla picked up one of the quilts and held it between 2 fingers like she was checking a hotel towel for stains. "Gloria, you should just donate all of it. The church will take it. Write it off on your taxes." She dropped the quilt back on the pile. Gloria nodded. "I've been meaning to clear that out." "No sense keeping it," Carla said. "It's just taking up space." That was the first time I heard Carla's voice. Casual, authoritative. She spoke about my dead mother's belongings the way you talk about leftovers you forgot in the back of the refrigerator. She did not look at me once. I stood in the doorway and watched them sort through my mother's life. The plates went into a box for the church rummage sale. The quilts went into a garbage bag. Carla picked up the jewelry box, turned it over, and the clasp popped open the way it always did. She looked inside, saw the thin gold chain and the pearl earrings and my mother's wedding ring, and shrugged. "Costume," she said. She dropped it in the bag with the quilts and tied the top shut. "I want you to hear what that felt like." They had already taken the money. They had already taken the trust my father spent 22 years building, 1 ham sandwich and 1 apple at a time. But this was different. This was my mother's hands on that sewing machine, my mother's fingers clasping those pearl earrings every morning before she left the room, my mother's wedding ring, the one my father saved 3 months to buy. They were erasing her, not just spending what she left behind, but erasing the proof she ever existed. And I could not stop it. I was 17 years old, living in someone else's house, wearing someone else's clothes. I had no power and no one to call. So I stood in that doorway and watched my mother disappear a second time, and I did not say a word. But I remembered every piece, every quilt, every plate, every item Carla dropped into that bag. I was already keeping a list in my head, the same way I had been tracking the vacations and the packages and the voice that dropped low on the phone. I did not know what I would do with that list, but I was building it. They had no idea what I was building. 3 weeks later, I found out exactly who they were. It was a Tuesday night, past 11. I came down the hallway for water and heard Gloria's voice behind her bedroom door. Low. The same register she used when the packages were being arranged, when things were being shipped to addresses I was not supposed to know about. I stopped. Something in me, that quiet thing that had been filing and counting for years, went still. "Girl, that child don't know nothing, Nardra," Gloria said. She laughed soft and dry. "She just sits up in that room doing homework like she got somewhere to go." A pause. Carla's voice on the other end, too faint for words, but the tone was clear, amused. "You think I'm worried about her?" Gloria said. "She's somebody else's sad little girl. We took her in. We put a roof over her head. Those estate checks, we earned it. You think raising somebody else's sad little girl is free?" Carla laughed. I could hear it through the phone, through the door, through my chest. Somebody else's sad little girl. We earned that. I stood in that hallway with my bare feet on the cold floor, and I did not breathe. I did not cry. Something inside me went quiet, not sad, not angry, done, like a switch being turned off, like a door closing and the lock clicking into place and the key being thrown away. They had never loved me, not even when no one was watching. I was a paycheck, a line item, somebody else's sad little girl, and they had earned every dollar they took from me. I went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, and pressed my palms flat against my knees until they stopped shaking. Then I did something I had never done before. I counted the months, 7 months until I turned 18, 7 months until I could walk into an office and ask to see the records they had been keeping in my name, the trust my father built, the money that was supposed to carry me into adulthood. 7 months. I could survive 7 months. I had survived 7 years. The family performance was over. They just did not know it yet. I did my homework, kept my room clean, said yes, ma'am, and no, sir, and smiled when Gloria told the women at church what a blessing I was. I played the part because the part was all that kept a roof over my head, and I needed that roof for 7 more months, not a day longer. 3 weeks before I aged out of the foster system, I turned 18. I did not tell the banks. I put on my shoes, walked downtown, and went to the county probate court. I asked to see the estate records for the trust of Raymond and Lena Cross. The clerk looked at my ID and handed me a folder. "Take your time, honey," she said. I sat at a metal table under fluorescent lights and opened it. $300,000. That was what my parents left me. 22 years of ham sandwiches and a cooler that never changed. 22 years of my mother hemming dresses at the kitchen table. 2 people who never took a vacation, never bought a new car, never spent a dollar they did not have to spend because they were building something for their daughter. The current balance of the trust was $847. $847. I want you to sit with that number. $300,000 built by 2 people who loved me more than they loved their own comfort, reduced to $847 by 2 people who called me somebody else's sad little girl behind a closed door. I did not cry. I closed the folder, opened it again, read every line, every disbursement, every withdrawal, every transfer, the amounts that went out month after month, $1,800 here, $2,000 there, $2,400 the month they took that trip to Charleston. Then I went back the next day. And the day after that, for 3 weeks, I sat at that same metal table and documented everything, copied statements by hand because I could not afford a copy machine, wrote down every dollar, every date, every payee. I made a spreadsheet on notebook paper with a ruler and a pencil, the same way my father would have done it because his discipline was the only inheritance they could not steal. I found the vacations: Myrtle Beach, Savannah, Florida, Charleston, Hilton Head, all of them, right there in the disbursement records charged against my trust. I found the packages, the furniture, the electronics, the renovations. I found the $48,000 in care expenses that I had never received, tutoring I never got, clothing allowances that bought me nothing, medical bills for procedures that never happened. I found it all, and then I found the china, a line item from 14 months earlier. An antique china set appraised at $4,200, purchased through the estate account. I had seen that china. It sat in Gloria's hutch in the dining room, behind glass doors, 12-place settings with gold rims I had been told not to touch. I had walked past it 1,000 times. I did not know it was bought with my dead father's money. $4,200. For plates behind glass in a house where I ate off the mismatched ones my mother collected from yard sales, the ones they donated to the church rummage sale. They replaced my mother's plates with plates they bought with my mother's money and put them behind glass where I could see them but never use them. That was when the plan formed, not all at once, but the shape of it, the architecture of what I was about to do, crystallized in my mind the way my father's savings had crystallized over 22 years, one piece at a time, patient, methodical. I took the china, not in the middle of the night, not in secret. I waited until Gloria and Jerome were at Wednesday night Bible study. I opened the hutch, wrapped each piece in newspaper, packed all 12-place settings into boxes, and drove them to the church. I donated them in the bank's name. Signed the donation receipt myself, Mrs. Gloria Banks, Generous donation to Mount Calvary Baptist Church. I even smiled when the church secretary thanked me. The trap was set. That Sunday, I walked into Mount Calvary Baptist Church for the last time. Same church where Jerome stood up in his deacon suit and said he would take me in. Same church where Gloria pressed her hand to her chest like the Holy Spirit moved her. Same pews, same people. Pastor Whitfield was thanking the congregation for their donations. He mentioned the Banks' generous gift of fine china. Gloria smiled from the third row. Jerome nodded like a man receiving his due. I stood up. "I'd like to say something about that donation," I said. My voice did not shake. The sanctuary went quiet. Gloria's smile did not change at first. She thought the sad little girl was going to express her gratitude. "That china set was purchased 14 months ago with funds from my parents' estate trust," I said. $4,200? The same trust that was supposed to provide for my care, my education, and my future after my parents died. I held up the notebook. 3 weeks of handwritten records, every number, every date, every dollar. In the 8 years I have lived with the Banks family, the trust my parents left me, $300,000 has been reduced to $847. I have documentation of 6 vacations paid for with my trust money. I have documentation of home renovations, furniture, electronics, clothing, and jewelry purchased with money designated for my care. I have documentation of $48,000 in care expenses that were reported but never provided. I never received tutoring. I never received a clothing allowance. I wore hand-me-downs from this church's own donation bin. I looked at Gloria. Her gloved hands were gripping the pew in front of her. Jerome's jaw had gone slack. The congregation was silent, the kind of silence that has weight, the kind that presses down on a room like a held breath. $847, I said. That is what is left of 22 years of my father's work, and I wanted you all to know. I sat down. I did not say anything else. I did not need to. The sanctuary erupted in whispers. Sister Davis, the same woman who once told Gloria the Lord had put me right where I needed to be, stood up and walked out without a word. Pastor Whitfield closed his Bible and asked Gloria and Jerome to remain after the service. Other families gathered their things and left. Most of them looked at the floor. No one called the police. No lawyer stepped forward. No institutional authority acted. The Banks' reputation was destroyed in that room, publicly, permanently, in front of every person who had ever praised them. But destroyed reputations do not write restitution checks. The money was gone. The law offered nothing to an 18-year-old with a handwritten ledger and $847. I had won something. I told the truth in the room where the lie was built, and I watched it collapse. But the truth did not give me back my mother's quilts or my father's savings or the childhood I was supposed to have. It gave me the look on Gloria's face and the parking lot and the road out of town and nothing else. I left. $847 in my pocket. No family, no advocate, no legal recourse. I drove out of the only town I had ever known in a car I borrowed from a classmate's mother who handed me the keys without a question. I did not look back. The community whispered for months. The Banks stopped coming to church. Jerome resigned his deacon's seat. Gloria's name was removed from the women's auxiliary, but no one filed charges. No one contacted the probate court. They shook their heads and said what a shame it was, and moved on to the next Sunday and the next and the next. I went to Atlanta. I will compress 17 years into the space they deserve, which is to say, they were hard and they were mine, and I built every single one of them from nothing. I enrolled at Georgia State on grants and scholarships I applied for from the floor of a studio apartment I shared with 2 other girls, worked nights at a copy center and weekends at a grocery store, graduated in 4 years with a degree in social work because I decided that no child should ever sit across from an empty trust account and discover their childhood was a lie. I got my master's in public administration, moved through 3 nonprofits in 5 years, each one closer to the work I was meant to do. I testified before a state oversight committee at 26. I learned the law the way my father learned the row, one road at a time, until I knew every turn. 11 years ago, I walked into Safe Harbor, a small nonprofit in Atlanta that advocates for foster children's financial rights. I started as a caseworker, became a program director, built a team that reviewed trust accounts and benefit disbursements for foster children across the state, the work no one had done for me when I was 10 years old and someone should have been watching. I became the advocate I never had. For 11 years, that was enough. Then Beverly Okafor sat down across from me with a case file and changed everything. Beverly was reviewing the file of a girl named Destiny Monroe, 14 years old, both parents deceased, trust established from a wrongful death settlement, foster family managing the disbursements. The parallels were close enough to make my chest tighten. Beverly set the file down and looked at me over the top of her glasses. She had been doing pro bono work with Safe Harbor for 2 years, and in that time she had heard pieces of my story in fragments over coffee, never the whole thing. That afternoon, she asked the question no one had ever asked. Amara, you've been doing this work for 11 years, she said, fighting for other people's children, building cases just like this one. She tapped the edge of Destiny's file. Did anyone ever pursue this for you? I sat in my chair and I felt something shift, not break, not crack, shift the way tectonic plates shift, slow and deep and irreversible. For 17 years, I had carried that story like a scar, healed over, sealed shut, something I survived but never revisited. I had taken the $847 and turned it into a life, and I had told myself that was enough, that the church had been my justice, that the look on Gloria's face was my restitution. But Beverly was not asking about the past. She was asking about the law. And for the first time in 17 years, I let myself consider the possibility that justice was not finished with me yet. Beverly did not ask me again. She pulled a yellow legal pad from her bag, uncapped a pen, and said 4 words that changed my life. The statute was told. I looked at her. Georgia tolls the statute of limitations during minority, she said. That means the clock did not start running on your case when the theft occurred. It started when you turned 18. You are 35 years old, Amara. Depending on the cause of action, your window is still open. I sat very still. 17 years I had carried that story like a sealed verdict. Done. No appeal, no remedy. The law had nothing for an 18-year-old girl with a handwritten ledger and $847. That is what I believed every time the old anger surfaced, every time I sat across from another foster child's empty trust account and felt the heat rise in my chest. It was over. But the door I thought was locked had been open the entire time. The law had been waiting for me to walk back through it. You're telling me I can still file, I said. Beverly set her pen down. I am telling you that you have a case, a strong one, and I would like to take it. I want you to understand what that moment felt like. Not hope, not relief, something harder and quieter than both, like finding a weapon you thought was empty and discovering it had been loaded all along. I was not 18 anymore. I was not standing in a probate office with shaking hands and a notebook full of numbers no one wanted to see. I was 35, with a degree, a career, 11 years of expertise in exactly the field that mattered, and an attorney who knew what to do with everything I had carried for half my life. Do it, I said. File it. Beverly filed the civil suit within 3 weeks. Breach of fiduciary duty, conversion, fraud, unjust enrichment. The complaint named Jerome Banks as primary trustee and Gloria Banks as co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the diverted funds. And then Beverly did something I could not have done at 18, something that required the machinery of the legal system to be pointed at the right people with the right authority. She issued discovery subpoenas. Subpoenas compel production. They do not ask. They require, under penalty of law, that the opposing party produce every document related to the administration of the trust. bank records, correspondence, and the annual care expense reports that Jerome, as trustee, had filed with the estate each year for 8 years. I had never seen those reports. At 18, I found the disbursement records, the outgoing money, but not the source documents, not the reports Jerome filed to justify where $300,000 went over 8 years of raising somebody else's sad little girl. Now, those reports were produced. Beverly called me on a Wednesday evening. Her voice was different, controlled the way a person sounds when they are holding something heavy and choosing their words with care. Amara, I need you to come to my office. There are documents you need to see. I drove to her office that night. She had the reports laid out across her conference table, 8 years of annual filings, each one signed at the bottom in Jerome Banks's handwriting. I recognized the signature from church bulletins and custody papers. I sat down and started reading. The reports described a child who received $400 a month in private tutoring, a child who had $3,200 in orthodontic work, a child who attended summer camp every year at a cost of $1,800, a child who received a $200 monthly clothing allowance. I read those numbers and I could not speak. I never had a tutor, not once. I did my homework alone at the kitchen table every night for 8 years. I never had braces. Nobody ever took me to an orthodontist because nobody ever considered that I might need one. I never went to summer camp. I spent every summer in that house, walking to the library because there was nowhere else to go, and I never, not once, received a clothing allowance. I wore hand-me-downs from the church donation bin until I was 18 years old. The girl in those reports had braces I never wore, tutoring I never received, summer camps I never attended, and clothes I never owned. She was fiction. A ghost daughter, invented on paper to justify the theft of everything my parents left me, and Jerome Banks signed his name to her existence every single year for 8 years. That was the second time someone showed me exactly who they were. The first was Gloria's voice through a bedroom door. This was worse. This was not contempt whispered to a sister on the phone. This was contempt documented, notarized and filed, contempt with a signature. I looked at Beverly across the table, and I did not have to ask the question. She answered it. Forgery, she said. Filing fabricated documents with a fiduciary obligation. Theft by conversion under Georgia law, which at this amount is a felony. These reports changed the nature of the case, Amara. This is not just civil anymore. Criminal, I said. Beverly nodded. I am making a referral to the district attorney's office this week. What we have here is enough to open a criminal investigation alongside the civil suit. I sat with that for a moment. The legal machinery that did not exist for me at 18 was now engaging, piece by piece, gear by gear, civil and criminal. 2 tracks, running parallel, aimed at the same people who told a congregation they took me in out of Christian duty while they invented a daughter on paper who got everything I never did. But Beverly was not finished. Her team had been building the case outward, contacting anyone with knowledge of the Banks family's financial history. One of those contacts was a woman named Sharon Banks, Jerome and Gloria's biological daughter, 42 years old, estranged from her parents for over a decade. She called me back within an hour, Beverly said. Sharon did not need convincing. She did not need persuading. She had been waiting 15 years for someone to ask. I watched it happen, Sharon told Beverly. Not yours specifically, but theirs. The spending, the lifestyle, the way things showed up in that house that had no business being there. I stopped going around when I was 27 because I could not sit at that table anymore and pretend I did not see what I was seeing. But no one ever asked me, not once in 15 years. Sharon had documentation, her own records carefully kept of gifts she had seen, purchases she had questioned, conversations she remembered. 15 years of a daughter watching her parents and knowing something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. She agreed to testify, without hesitation, without conditions. Their own daughter, the one who watched everything and said nothing for years because no one ever asked. And Then there was the last piece, the piece I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. Beverly traced the shipping records, the packages Gloria arranged on the phone in that low voice, the deliveries that never arrived at the house, the ones she said were going to my sister's place. Beverly followed the paper trail, and it led exactly where it should have. Carla Hayes, Macon, Georgia, online shopping accounts linked to disbursements from my trust, a gold bracelet valued at $1,400, 2 vacation packages, $2,200 each, clothing, electronics, smaller items spread across years. Total identifiable benefit to Carla Hayes, approximately $8,200. Carla was not just the woman who laughed on the phone while Gloria called me a sad little girl. She was not just the woman who dropped my mother's wedding ring into a garbage bag and called it costume. She was a co-conspirator with a paper trail, a shipping address, and $8,200 in receipts that proved it. Every thread Beverly pulled connected to another thread. The forged reports, Sharon's testimony, Carla's shipping address, the disbursement records I copied by hand at 18. All of it was weaving together into something I could not have built alone, something that required a lawyer, a legal system, and 17 years of becoming the kind of woman who could sit in a conference room and look at the worst thing that ever happened to her without flinching. The case was no longer about what they had done to me. It was about what they had done to the law. Beverly added Carla Hayes to the civil filing on a Monday. Co-conspirator, named, documented, served, 3 villains, all of them on paper now. That same week, Beverly brought in Marcus Neal. Marcus was a forensic accountant, a quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses who spoke in numbers the way some people speak in prayer, with absolute conviction and zero embellishment. Beverly handed him every document we had. The disbursement records, the forged care expense reports, Sharon's documentation, Carla's shipping receipts, the full trust history from probate. She told him to follow every dollar. He did. It took Marcus 3 weeks. When he was finished, he sat across from us in Beverly's conference room and laid a single sheet of paper on the table. $247,000, he said. That is the total amount I can trace from the trust to expenditures that did not benefit the ward. I looked at that number. $247,000. My father drove a delivery truck for 22 years to build $300,000. They took $247,000 of it. Marcus walked us through the breakdown. 6 domestic vacations charged to the trust over 8 years, online shopping accounts in Gloria's name with payments drawn from estate funds, the antique china set, $4,200, home renovations, new tile, new appliances, new furniture, jewelry purchases, clothing, electronics, gifts shipped to Carla's address in Macon, and then he got to the piece I had never found. There is also a rental property, Marcus said, purchased 7 years ago. The down payment was $62,000 drawn directly from the trust. The property is titled in Jerome Banks's name. It generates approximately $850 a month in rental income, none of which has ever been reported to the estate. $62,000 a house, bought with my dead parents' money, generating income Jerome pocketed every month while I wore shoes from a donation bin and never once asked why money was tight. Beverly looked at me. I looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his spreadsheet like it was a confession written in arithmetic. All of it traceable, he said. Every dollar. Beverly filed the criminal referral the following week. The district attorney's office reviewed the forged care expense reports, the forensic accounting, and the evidence of systematic diversion over 8 years. The DA accepted the case. Criminal charges, not just civil anymore. Jerome and Gloria Banks were now defendants in a criminal investigation for theft by conversion, forgery, and exploitation of a minor ward. The forged reports Jerome signed every year for 8 years were not just evidence of greed. They were felonies. The banks found out, and they fought back. Their first move was a countersuit. Jerome and Gloria filed against me for defamation. $50,000 in damages. The claim alleged that my civil suit contained false statements designed to destroy their reputation. Beverly read the filing and set it down. "This is frivolous," she said. "Every claim in our suit is backed by documentary evidence. Every dollar amount is supported by bank records and forensic accounting. They are trying to scare you, Amara. This will not survive a motion to dismiss." She was right. It did not. Their second move was worse. Gloria called Sharon. I was not on the line. Sharon told me afterward, and her voice was steady the way a person's voice is steady when they have been expecting the blow and braced for it. She said I was dead to her, Sharon told me. Those were her exact words. "You are dead to this family, Sharon. You hear me? Dead." She said if I testified, she would make sure I regretted it for the rest of my life. Gloria Banks, 70 years old, threatening her own daughter because her own daughter had the nerve to tell the truth. Sharon did not flinch. She had waited 15 years. Gloria's threat landed on a woman who had already walked away from that table, who had already chosen silence and distance because she could not stomach what she was watching. Now someone had finally asked, and no phone call from her mother was going to undo 15 years of knowing. "I'm testifying," Sharon said. "I have been ready since I was 27. Their third move was the most desperate. Jerome attempted to transfer the rental property to Carla Hayes, the $62,000 house, the one Marcus had just traced to my trust. Jerome tried to move the deed into Carla's name quietly before the judgment came down, before the court could seize it. Beverly caught it. She had been watching. The moment Marcus identified the property, Beverly placed a monitoring alert on the deed. When Jerome filed the transfer paperwork, her team was notified within 24 hours. "Fraudulent conveyance," Beverly said. "Attempting to transfer assets to avoid a civil judgment. That is contempt of court and an additional criminal charge. He just made things significantly worse for himself. The property was now guaranteed for seizure. Jerome's attempt to hide it had ensured the court would take it. 3 moves, countersuit, threat, fraudulent transfer. Every single one failed. Every single one added evidence. The banks were cornered, and every time they swung, they hit themselves. The courtroom was about to see what I had been carrying for 25 years. The trial lasted 4 days. I will tell you about the morning that mattered. The prosecutor laid Jerome's forged care expense reports on one side of the evidence table. 8 years of annual filings, Jerome's signature at the bottom of every page, $400 a month in private tutoring, $3,200 in orthodontic work, $1,800 a year for summer camp, $200 a month for clothing. Then on the other side, the real records. School records from my elementary and middle school. No tutoring program, no private instruction, no supplemental education of any kind. My academic file showed a girl who did her homework alone at a kitchen table every night. Dental records, no orthodontic work, no braces, no retainer, no consultation, no referral, nothing. So summer program schedules from the county. I was never enrolled, not once. Not in any program, any camp, any activity. Every summer I was in that house or at the library. Clothing receipts, none. Not a single purchase in my name. Not shoes, not a coat, not a backpack. For every line Jerome claimed there was a real document showing it never happened. The ghost daughter he invented on paper. The one who got braces and tutoring and summer camp and new clothes. She did not exist. She never existed. The only girl in that house was me, and I got nothing. Marcus Neal took the stand and presented the full forensic accounting. $247,000 in traceable diversions. He walked through every category, every line item, every dollar Jerome could not account for. Sharon testified. Briefly, quietly, she confirmed the spending pattern she had witnessed for years, the vacations, the purchases, the lifestyle that did not match what her parents claimed they could afford. Jerome sat at the defense table. I watched his face as the evidence was presented. After the school records, his jaw tightened. After the dental records, his hands went flat on the table. After Marcus finished the forensic accounting, Jerome went still, completely still, the way a man goes still when every exit is sealed and he knows it. He could not explain the tutoring. He could not explain the orthodontics. He could not explain the summer camp or the clothing allowance or the $62,000 rental property. He could not explain a single line item, not one. Gloria sat behind him. She did not look at me. She did not look at the documents. She stared at the back of Jerome's head like she was watching a wall collapse from the inside. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty. All counts: Jerome Banks, theft by conversion, forgery, exploitation of a minor ward, fraudulent conveyance. 8 years, Georgia State Prison. Criminal restitution ordered. Gloria Banks, theft by conversion, forgery, exploitation of a minor ward. 5 years, Georgia State Prison. Criminal restitution ordered. Carla Hayes, accessory after the fact. Receipt of stolen property. 3 years probation. 200 hours of community service. Ordered to return $8,200. Civil judgment entered $187,000. Joint and several liability. Property seizure ordered on the rental property purchased with $62,000 of my trust. The courtroom was quiet after sentencing, not the kind of quiet that follows an explosion, the kind that follows an exhale, the kind that has weight and shape and finally enough room to breathe. I sat in my chair. My hands were in my lap. They had been clenched for so long I had not noticed. I opened them, slowly, one finger at a time, and I felt something release in my chest that I had been holding since I was 10 years old, standing in a hallway with a garbage bag full of clothes and a jewelry box with a broken clasp, pressing the lid down because it was the only thing I could still hold shut. I did not gloat. I did not speak. I looked at the bench where the judge had just read 3 sentences that gave me back something no dollar amount could name: 25 years, $300,000, 847, and now this. Justice is not loud. It is not a celebration. It is the sound of a door finally closing on the people who should have loved you and chose to rob you instead. It is sitting in a courtroom with your hands open and your back straight and knowing that the girl in those reports, the ghost daughter who got everything you never did, she has been laid to rest. And the real daughter, the one who survived, she is still here. The property was scheduled for court auction. The judgment was entered. The restitution was ordered. I walked out of that courtroom the same way I walked into the probate office at 18, alone, but not the same, not anymore. The judgment moved the way water moves through stone, slowly, but it moved. $187,000, joint and several liability. Jerome, Gloria, Carla, the debt belonged to all 3. Jerome's savings went first, then Gloria's. Then the joint account they had built over 40 years, the one funded by my father's trust and dressed up as retirement. The court drained it the way they had drained my inheritance, without sentiment, dollar by dollar. Retirement accounts followed, IRAs and pensions attached by court order. Every asset Marcus Neal had identified was now on the table. And there was the rental property, $62,000 of my trust money, converted into a bungalow in East Point that Jerome pocketed rent on for 7 years. The court declared it fraudulently acquired and ordered it sold at public auction. My mother's quilts could not be returned. Her mismatched plates were gone. Her wedding ring, dropped into a garbage bag by a woman who called it costume, was never recovered, but the judgment acknowledged them. Line by line, the court noted the personal property of Lena Cross disposed of without the ward's consent, my mother's name, in a legal document, recognized, not erased. The system followed through. 17 years late, but it followed through. The auction was held on a Tuesday morning at the Fulton County Courthouse. A small room, fluorescent lights, folding chairs arranged in rows. The auctioneer stood behind a wooden podium with a microphone that crackled when he leaned too close. I sat in the 3rd row, Beverly beside me. She told me I did not have to bid. The property would sell regardless, and the proceeds would go toward my judgment, but I wanted to bid. That house was $62,000 of my father's discipline, 22 years of ham sandwiches in a cooler that never changed, converted into walls and a roof with the wrong name on the deed. I wanted to put the right name on it. The auctioneer opened the bidding. Property located at 3417 Langford Drive, East Point, Georgia, 3-bedroom, 1-bath bungalow, court-ordered sale. Opening bid, $45,000. I raised my hand. 2 other bidders, an investor in a gray suit, dropped out at $52,000. A woman with a clipboard stopped at $58,000. $58,000 going once, $58,000 going twice. The gavel came down. Sold! $58,000 to the bidder in row 3. Beverly squeezed my arm. I sat in that folding chair and breathed, the way you breathe when something you have carried for a very long time finally finds a place to rest. The deed transfer took 11 days. I stood in a title office on a Wednesday afternoon and signed my name on a line I had been walking toward for 25 years. The document read, Amara Cross, successor to the estate of Raymond and Lena Cross. I read those words 3 times. My name, my parents' names, together on a deed. Successor, not victim, not ward, not somebody else's sad little girl. Successor to the estate of 2 people who spent their whole lives building something for their daughter. Their discipline became a trust. The trust was stolen. The stolen money became a house. And now the house was mine. His discipline was the only inheritance they could not steal. It came full circle in a title office on a Wednesday with my signature and his name beside it. I held that deed the way I held my mother's jewelry box when I was 10, like it was the last piece of something precious. Carla Hayes was ordered to return $8,200 and complete 200 hours of community service. She did not contest it. Gloria stopped speaking to her after the trial, which meant Carla lost both the money and the sister in the same season. 3 villains, all accounted for. Jerome behind bars for 8 years, Gloria for 5, Carla alone in Macon with a community service schedule and a phone that no longer rings. I want you to know what my life looks like now. I live in the house on Langford Drive, the bungalow Jerome bought with my trust money and rented out for 7 years. I repainted the walls a warm terracotta, put down hardwood floors where the old carpet was matted and stained. The kitchen is small, the way my mother's kitchen was small, and I keep it warmer than it needs to be because that is what home is supposed to feel like. I still work at Safe Harbor. Carol Osey started the same year the trial ended. She brings tea to my office on the hard days and does not ask me to explain why. Beverly still does pro bono work with us. She became more than my attorney a long time ago. And Sharon calls every few weeks. We do not talk about the trial. We talk about books, about weather, about the small, ordinary things people talk about when they have decided to be in each other's lives. Found family, built on honesty instead of obligation. I am not alone anymore. That is the part I did not expect. Here's what I learned. I did not learn it at 18. I learned it at 35, sitting in Beverly's conference room, looking at documents I had been afraid to face for half my life. Justice does not always come when you call for it. Sometimes it waits until you are ready to carry it. I had the courage at 18. I stood up in that church and told the truth, and it gave me nothing but the road out of town. But courage without tools is just a voice in an empty room. 17 years later, I had the tools, the degree, the expertise, the attorney, the patience my father taught me without ever saying a word about it. It is not about being brave enough. It is about becoming ready. This morning, I made coffee in the kitchen on Langford Drive. The sun came through the window above the sink and fell across the counter in a long, warm stripe. The house was quiet. Not the quiet of emptiness, the quiet of peace, the kind that has weight and warmth and does not need to be filled. On my dresser in the bedroom sits a jewelry box with a broken clasp, the same one, my mother's. The lid still pops open if you do not press it down. For 25 years, I pressed that clasp shut every time it gave, holding closed the only thing I had left of her. I do not press it anymore. I leave it open. The pearl earrings and the thin gold chain sit inside where she left them, and the lid rests at an angle slightly ajar, the way a door looks when someone has just come home and has not closed it yet because they are staying. The kitchen is warm, the coffee is good, the house is mine, and somewhere in a place I cannot see, but have always felt my mother is setting mismatched plates on the table and turning the radio to the gospel station. My father is packing his lunch. And their daughter, the one they spent their whole lives building something for, she is finally home.